Good morning. It's Tuesday, May 1st, 2012, and I'm almost forced to put up a video because I'm very concerned about an article I read in the New York Times this morning that the clouds' effect on climate change is the last bastion for dissenters. And the whole article is about the claims of primarily one scientist, Richard S. Lindzen, a professor of meteorology at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, who is the leading proponent of the view that clouds will save the day in the global warming battle. And it's like the clouds are going to get together and defeat the global warming. And I will read this to you because, according to every other scientist who I see in the article, they disagree entirely that this one man is fighting and proposing that we really need to do nothing about global warming. It says, yes, the climate is warming, and it is due to greenhouse gases, but he says the clouds are going to come to the rescue and will automatically allow more of the heat to disappear into space, because the highest layer of cirrus clouds will thin out and allow more heat to escape, whereas now the cirrus clouds, the very highest clouds, keep heat in, and the lower clouds reflect heat out. The cumulus, the ones we find closer to ground, keep reflecting sunlight out. But his theory is that the clouds are going to save us, and people love him. People in the world who don't wish to do anything about global warming, don't want to cut back our emissions, don't want to spend the money on clean energy, who just oppose the whole thing, are very wild about this guy, because he's a real MIT scientist who says that there's no need to worry about global warming. The clouds are going to adjust and allow more heat to escape. He says the Earth is not especially sensitive to greenhouse gases because clouds will react to counter them, and he believes he has identified a specific mechanism. On a warming planet, he says, less coverage by high clouds in the tropics will allow more heat to escape to space. And that's his plan. I would hope he was right. But most of the scientists seem to disagree and say his information is very faulty and not clear and not proven and all kinds of things. In other words, most scientists disagree. His idea has drawn withering criticism from other scientists who cite errors in his papers and say proof is lacking. Enough evidence is already in hand, they say, to rule out the powerful cooling effect from clouds that would be needed to offset the increase of greenhouse gases. However, politicians looking for a reason not to tackle climate change have embraced Dr. Lindzen and other skeptics, elevating their role in the public debate. Well, of course, who wouldn't? Dr. Lindzen has obliged by assuring them that they are running no risks by refusing to enact emission limits. There's been a lot of scare stuff put out there that just doesn't make sense, he said in an interview. Doesn't make sense. Some politicians have welcomed that measure, regularly calling Dr. Lindzen and a handful of other contrarian scientists before congressional committees. During a hearing before a House subcommittee, Representative Dana Rohrabacher, a California Republican and vocal global warming skeptic, complained that in the scientific community there are people trying to tell us that we have got to accept draconian changes in our way of life mandated by law because of the CO2 that we are emitting is going to cause drastic consequences to the planet's climate. You know, I think people agree. I mean, people agree to that. A lot of people agree. While the scientific majority acknowledges that the lingering uncertainty about clouds plays into the hands of skeptics like Dr. Lindzen, they say that he has gone way beyond any reasonable reading of the evidence to provide a dangerous alibi for inaction. A dangerous alibi for inaction. I think that's what this is all about. A dangerous alibi for inaction. Dr. Lindzen, according to this New York Times article, a quote from somebody here, some guy, Dr. Lindzen is feeding upon an audience that wants to hear a certain message and wants to hear it put forth by people with enough scientific reputation that it can be sustained for a while, even if it's wrong science, said Christopher S. Bretherton, an atmospheric researcher at the University of Washington. I don't think it's intellectually honest at all. With climate policy nearly paralyzed in the United States, many other governments have also declined to take action, and worldwide emissions of greenhouse gases are soaring. Now, don't you think that could be a problem? I mean, we're sitting right here. We can do something about it, but we're not. We're not. Because those greenhouse gases mean money in people's hands. So what we're doing is we're just chewing up the atmosphere in order to have money to go to the beach, or buy a fast car, or buy a big home, anything else but just tackle the real problem. And unfortunately, it seems that humanity, through the years, through the ages, has just been never quick to respond to things like this until it's absolutely desperately necessary. I mean, when the ocean reaches your front door and you go, what can I do about this? The energy that drives life on Earth arrives as sunlight. To remain at a steady temperature, the Earth has to return the energy it receives back to space, primarily as heat. Clouds alter the energy flow in both directions. Pay attention, this is important. On balance, in today's climate, clouds cool the Earth. Dense, low-lying clouds are responsible for most of that effect because they reflect considerable sunlight back to space. Many high, thin clouds have the opposite influence, allowing incoming sunshine to pass through, but effectively trapping heat that's trying to escape. It's like putting a lid on a pot on the stove, said Andreas Mühlbauer, a cloud researcher at the University of Washington. The article here in the Times quotes everybody who says, yes, humans are putting greenhouse gases. It doesn't deny that humans are putting greenhouse gases back, so I won't bother to read you all that stuff. Even Dr. Lindzen agrees that we're spewing gases into the atmosphere. So, researchers are virtually certain that the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere will rise with temperature, and evidence suggests that this is already happening. But it does not say much about the type or location of clouds that will condense from the vapor. Among the many climate skeptics who plaster the internet with their writings, hardly any have serious credentials in the physics of the atmosphere, but a handful of contrarian scientists do. The most influential is Dr. Lindzen. He's going to love this article. I can't wait to see what he has to say about this. Dr. Lindzen accepts the elementary tenets of climate science. He agrees that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, calling people who dispute that point nutty. He calls them nutty. He agrees that the level of it is rising because of human activity and that this should warm the climate. Okay, we're all on the same page, but then he says, but you don't have to do anything about it because the clouds, the cirrus clouds, are going to stop keeping heat in. He says the cirrus clouds keep heat in like the lid on a pressure cooker, like the lid on a pot on a stove. That's more like it. And he says that the cirrus clouds, especially over the equator, I think it is, are going to become dissipated, become less, and more heat will escape. And Actually, oh, I see. But for more than a decade, Dr. Lindzen has said that when surface temperatures increase, the columns of moist air rising in the tropics will rain out more of their moisture, leaving less available to be thrown off as ice, which forms thin, high clouds known as cirrus. He said, just like greenhouse gases, these cirrus clouds act to reduce the cooling of the Earth, and a decrease of them would counteract the increase of greenhouse gases. So, a decrease in cirrus clouds, and thus the heat's going to escape. When Dr. Lindzen first published this theory, he said it was supported by satellite records over the Pacific Ocean, but other researchers quickly published works saying that the methods he had used to analyze the data were flawed and that his theory made assumptions that were inconsistent with known facts. In other words, people said, no, it's not true. Now, climate people will say everybody who disagrees with Dr. Lindzen is being paid by somebody. I don't know who's got that kind of money, but they're being paid. Today, most mainstream researchers consider Dr. Lindzen's theory discredited. He doesn't agree, but he has had difficulty establishing his case in the scientific literature. Dr. Lindzen published a paper in 2009 offering more support for his case that the Earth's sensitivity to greenhouse gases is low. But once again, scientists identified errors, including a failure to account for known inaccuracies in satellite measurements. Dr. Lindzen acknowledged that the 2009 paper contained some stupid mistakes. Blah, blah, blah. It was embarrassing, he said. The technical details of satellite measurements are really sort of grotesque. So, last year, he tried offering more evidence for his case. But after reviewers for a prestigious American journal criticized the paper, Dr. Lindzen published it in a little-known Korean journal. All right. The Koreans are pretty smart. But I don't know why they would publish that. I'm not knocking Korea. God knows those people. Maybe it was a North Korean journal. That could be pretty useless. So what it says here is researchers are trying various shortcuts to get a rapid answer about clouds and how they will contribute either to warming or cooling. One of those is to use short-term natural variations such as the El Niño cycle to see how clouds react to higher ocean temperatures. Dr. Dessler, the Texas A&M researcher, did that recently. His analysis, while not definitive, offered some evidence that clouds will exacerbate the long-term planetary warming, just as many of the computer programs have predicted. The computer programs have predicted that clouds will exacerbate global warming. And his research indicates that too. And I don't know why the clouds would suddenly decide to lower the temperature. But not all papers relying on the historical cloud record have come to similar conclusions. Most, but not all. In his congressional appearances and speeches and popular writings, Dr. Lindzen offers little hint of how thin the published science supporting his position is. He offers little hint of how thin the supporting science is. Instead, starting from his disputed iris mechanism, he makes what many of his colleagues see as an unwarranted leap of logic, professing near certainty that climate change is not a problem society needs to worry about. And folks, I'm telling you, climate change is a problem society needs to worry about. And I know nothing. I just look around, I read, I hear, I listen to people, and, you know, we've all seen how propaganda works. We've all seen how people will lie to get things done. And so many papers from so many art places seem to indicate that we are. I mean, when the global temperature has risen 1.4 degrees in the last 10 years or something like that. What was it? What did it say? Somewhere here it says, the Earth's surface has already warmed about 1.4 degrees since the Industrial Revolution, most of it in the last 40 years. Modest as it sounds, it is an average for the whole planet. representing an enormous addition of heat, 1.4 degrees. An even larger amount is being absorbed by the oceans. The increase has caused some of the world's land ice to melt and the oceans to rise. So there's evidence like that, and I tend to believe it. I mean, I got no reason not to believe it. I see it. It makes sense. I mean, the Earth never had this kind of so much CO2 being spewed into its atmosphere until we came along in the at the beginning of the the end of the 19th century, which would be around 1850, Industrial Revolution, and started pouring gas. And now the atmosphere is getting hotter. Okay, the Earth's climate is getting hotter. Well, it makes sense, don't you think? Don't you think we should stop it? And this guy, Dr. Lindzen, says, don't worry about it. The clouds are going to cool everything out. And he offers lousy scientific information. And so therefore, your grandchildren and my grandchildren are going to be in a sauna. The next step is, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? How can we begin to influence our government and our corporations and the world to just, I hate the word go green because it's such a big lie. Nothing's green yet. Nothing's green until you just absolutely really solve the problem. I mean, green is just is a title that so rarely accurately applies. Green. Give me a break. Anyway, I'm serious about this, and that's why I bothered to put this up on YouTube.